Well, let's get it kicked off. Welcome to the Accessibility Checker live stream. I'm Steve, and we have William
I'm Will.
here. And Will, are you going to go by Will on this one?
No, William's fine.
We'll do the short. I'll do Steve, you be Will. Yeah, so if anybody's joining, glad that you're joining us. Somebody said good morning. For me, it's afternoon.
I mean, 7 p.m. for me.
For William, it's evening. But yeah, good morning, wherever you're joining from. So cool. So like I said, this is the Accessibility Checker live stream. This is where we go over some of the newest features and changes inside of our Accessibility Checker plugin, which is an automated accessibility scanning plugin to help your WordPress website become and stay accessible. And Accessibility Checker is a suite of plugins. It's not just one plugin. We have a free WordPress plugin that is very full featured called Accessibility Checker. And then we have Accessibility Checker Pro that brings in the more advanced features. And then we have a few add-ons. We had an audit history add-on for tracking accessibility reports over time, the multi-site add-on for adding network-wide governance to Accessibility Checker to be able to apply your settings and your license keys and all those things straight from the network level. And then we have an export plugin that allows you to export your Accessibility Checker data to a CSV file. So with all that, William, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about allowing and disallowing people to do all of those things that you just mentioned. Selective.
That's right. Permissions. From permissions, controlling which WordPress roles can access reports and take specific actions. So just a little bit of background on this that I think is worth touching on for those joining in. Why permissions and why now?
Well, I'll let you say the why now, but because my answer would be never do this. But yeah, loosely, we have a bunch of different capabilities that are gated by various different requirements in WordPress, like the ability to edit posts, the ability to ignore issues, and previously they were not super granular. They were pretty globally applied, and now, and we've had various support tickets with people asking for why can't certain user do a thing, why can this user do a thing that we don't expect them to. So the time was, I mean, the time was 5 years ago to do this,
Yeah.
but better late than never.
Yeah, so I mean, we did take some steps in this direction 5 years ago, but we baked in kind of some permissions around who had the ability to dismiss issues, but which was a very kind of simplistic approach. And then there were some other permissions that arose over time that we kind of piggybacked off of that one setting to kind of have this setting act kind of globally as a permission gate. But through some, recent audit remediation projects that we've been working on, and like William said, some of the support tickets that have been coming in as of late, there have been a lot more in-depth inquiries into permissions and who can do what, where in the past we would make some assumptions around what roles typically we'll use Accessibility Checker, and we're finding that yeah, different user roles they're wanting, there's a lot. I don't know if this is all the security stuff coming up as of late, but people seem to be adding more strict policies around permissions inside their WordPress admins, and we're having to grant Accessibility Checker permissions to roles that we hadn't originally expected would need those permissions. And also not just the permission to dismiss or see reports, but actually to separate the two out. So there may be certain roles that they actually want to be able to just see the reports, but not actually action upon the issues. And it may be the other way around. So we kind of started on this journey of kind of fix this for those client needs and for those customer needs, and then it kind of ballooned, as sometimes these features do.
It started as an editor role needs to be able to scan their pages, and it became weeks of pain.
Right. And in the process of building software, sometimes you look for that quick win. You look, okay, we have this setting already. Can we kind of shoehorn this in or piggyback off of this to kind of achieve the immediate need, right? And then you could take a step back and say, well, we actually really should rethink this, and we should really rethink permissions granularly, how each action inside the plugin correlates to a core permission. And then going even further than that, saying it's not enough for us to just create the capability, but we also need to be mindful of of the capability permissions that WordPress core comes with out of the gate. So whereas we could create a capability and you could use a user role editor and apply that capability however you see fit, and it opens up that feature, it opens up that REST route, right? But we actually found that could be quite dangerous. So, and we're talking through some of this a little bit here too, about some of the gating and the floor and the respect that we're taking of currently applied roles. But before we jump in, just a little bit of the requirements here. So this actually required changes in almost all the plugins. Actually, I think all the plugins did get changed, but
All of the plugins. Yep.
um, uh, but Accessibility Checker version 1.48, Accessibility Checker Pro version 2.3.0, Accessibility Checker Export 1.5, and Accessibility Checker Audit History 1.6. The multi-site actually did get an update too, but it was just a notification of something that we'll touch on here in a little bit. So, William, with that preamble out done, do we want to pull up your screen and start walking through some of this?
Let's have a quick look.
All right.
Yep. So really the entry point to all of this is a new permissions tab we have on our settings page. So if you visit our accessibility checker settings and the permissions tab, this is what you will be presented with, a short description, title, and basically a user role selector box. And obviously some nice design that was provided by Steve, because you don't want to see what this looked like when I built it. But yeah, in this select box, all of the roles that are available on the website will exist, with exception to the administrator user. I will say up front that the administrator user can do everything. They do not have to have capabilities granted or taken away, or they can't be taken away. And this is just to prevent an administrator locking themselves out of a feature that they won't be able to re-grant on their own. So if we pick any of these user roles, so let's just pick the editor role, we now have 4 separate groups of individual capability grants. Accessibility checker free by default. Everyone will have these 3 options, which is they can dismiss their own issues, dismiss issues on any post, which we will touch on in a minute, and front end highlighter. And these 3 capabilities are in the free plugin for everyone. The Pro plugin has some additional capabilities: dismiss globally, issue explorer access, and full set scan capability. And the audit history only has 1 page, view audit history. That's the only capability for that. And the export plugin also only does one thing: export data. And all of these capabilities can be granted individually as needed based on whatever way you set up your own website. I will also say that if you have custom roles, they will appear in this list as well. My test site only has core provided roles, but all roles will appear in this list to pick from. So yeah, that's the editor role. An editor can be granted effectively anything by default as chosen. But let's take a look at the subscriber role. So a subscriber role by default only has read post capabilities, I believe, and as such are ineligible to be granted any of the other capabilities, with exception to the front end highlighter. Anyone can see the front end highlighter if you choose, any logged in user. I guess this is perfect time to talk about the floor.
Yeah. So let's touch on that a little bit. So this is kind of what I alluded to a little bit at the beginning, was that this respect for the floor and or capabilities, they have to have certain capabilities, edit post or edit other posts, things like that. So yeah, so here you can see in the UI that these are disabled. And can you touch on kind of our reasoning behind?
Yes. So the TLDR is that so a subscriber user cannot edit any posts, and as such will always be ineligible for dismissing their own issues. However, when we dismiss an issue, we store that in post metadata, and you need to be able to edit the post to update post metadata. Now, I will be clear that you can absolutely bypass that very easily. We have chosen not to because that feels a bit like a security risk. And same is true of editing other users' posts is a separate capability. So you can't dismiss globally ever if you can't edit other users' posts, because almost certainly you will be ignoring other people's things on a large website. But yeah, edit posts and edit others' posts are really the main gates we have here for the floor. So anyone who doesn't have one of those two capabilities will always be ineligible for any mutation backed capabilities we provide in any of the plugins.
Right. So to kind of go a little bit deeper on that a little bit, if you were to say, since these are custom capabilities, they are available. If you were using a user role editor and you actually applied one of these capabilities to, say, a subscriber role, that they don't have edit permissions.
Yes, so we actually have two gates. We have the custom capability, which is what we have added, which can be granted granularly to individual roles. However, anytime we check a custom capability, we also check whatever the floor is as well. And the floor is what enforces security. It means you can't accidentally give a subscriber access to dismiss issues globally where they could effectively read all of the issues or disable all the issues on your website. So that would be a potential leak of data if we allowed the capability singularly to override the core base requirement that we picked when we created the features.
Right. So from a programmatic standpoint, there's a gate here in the settings to not allow you to choose that. But
Yes, that
there's
exact same gate exists at the point where we validate someone has a capability. We also validate the floor exists as well.
right.
And there's two reasons for that. First off, general security is, it is good to make sure that your things are protected behind applicable core capabilities, first off. But secondly, if someone changes the level of a role later on, we still need to be backing them. So you could install another plugin that allows the author to edit everyone's posts. By default, they can't.
Right.
If that happens and they still don't have the edit other users' posts capability, they still can't be given this capability. It's always double gate.
Right.
Anything that mutates anything.
And we check it on the API calls as well. That's kind of
Yes.
what I'm alluding to here, was like, even if these were applied through other means besides our UI, that we actually still will block that
Anywhere
access.
you run these, if you make an API call, if you click a button in the UI, or even if you use WP CLI to run any of our updates, the secondary gate, or both of the gates, are always applied to every single instance I created. Helper functions that enforce whatever this floor level is, regardless of what's checked here.
Yeah. And it's and when you talk about security, right, we're trying to keep parity with what WordPress core's kind of permissions are in this regard, and respect those, and yeah, for security reasons, but also um, this could expand beyond one user role could end up with access to pieces of data from another user role that that the site owner doesn't really want them to have access to. It could be, you know, PII for of somebody's information that's been scanned in our database that we then don't want to overexpose that to people that shouldn't have it. Or in this case, it may be fine because you've given that user role that access. Like, you have to manually turn it on as the site owner. But
Yeah, so there is an unintended consequence of that. So take a scenario where you want an author role on your website to be able to edit any post at all. Giving them the capability to edit any post effectively allows them to gain export capabilities to export the entire site data. Now, by default, they will not get that capability. So having edit other users' posts doesn't immediately allow them to export all of the accessibility checker data. So that's the real point of the double gate.
right.
Unexpectedly granting access by allowing people to edit things shouldn't give them access to all of the things.
Yeah, totally. So you see here was if the user role doesn't match the floor that between edit and edit other posts, that that the setting will be grayed out. This will you also have grayed out settings if your license key is not active in Pro. If you have Pro features and the helper text that William outputs underneath the capability will tell them that's the reason, right?
It will. So if your license has expired, you will have a different message here underneath each one that says, license expired, update your license key. And
What does that say for since this doesn't have the capability? Can you read that out for?
um, so you mean the license thing? So I have an
No,
active
no,
license.
no. I'm saying just
Oh, yeah.
we
So
can see it, but I want to
yeah,
say
so
it.
requires the ability to edit other users' posts is one of the gates, and the other main gate is requires the ability to edit posts. And depending on which capability you're looking at, it will tell you exactly which capability is required for that user role. So requires the ability to edit posts, requires the ability to edit other users' posts.
Now, are there now this is kind of a rhetorical question that I already know, but for our listeners, but are there any areas where we actually stepped out of the floor a little bit?
There is one specific area. So dismiss issues across any posts. It says dismiss and reopen accessibility issues on any post, even if the user cannot otherwise edit it. So out of all of the capabilities we have here, this one is the only one that purposefully oversteps core requirements. So you still need to at least have the ability to edit posts, which is effectively your own posts. You can grant a user that can only edit their own posts the ability to dismiss posts, dismiss issues on any post. Now, this is the only capability that oversteps Core's existing capability grants. For edit other users' posts would be required to dismiss an issue generally on a
Mm-hmm.
post that you burnt the offer. And we did call that out by saying even if the user cannot otherwise edit it. So every other capability has a minimum floor that matches what the core expectation would be. This one is one step below what the core expectation would be. And that is because we might have well, we know that some customers have auditor type roles that should be able to ignore issues once they verify they're fine, but not necessarily able to edit everyone's posts on the website. So this is the one overstep. But aside from that, every other one has expected minimals.
Does this help facilitate contributors as well? Because there is a unique caveat with the contributor role that I think a lot of people, even
This
myself, overlook.
does so a contributor role could be granted this one because contributors do have the edit post capability, but they can only edit their own posts prior to them being published. Once that post publishes, they would no longer be able to dismiss issues, scan the posts, do anything at all, which is kind of unique for contributor. But you might have a user that is a contributor or effectively someone who you don't want to be able to edit all the content on the website, but still be able to audit the issues. And this is the one capability that allows for that, with the caveat that it does ever so slightly step one. It goes one level above what the core capability would allow alone.
Yeah. Cool. Can we test one? Can we like look at so one area that I like here is that we've kind of had several requests for the front end highlighter not to output on the front end for certain user roles. So now
if we go to the subscriber, I do have front end highlighter enabled for the subscriber role as part of the test, but by default, a subscriber role will get no capability grants at all. So if I were to save these permissions and then I switch to a subscriber role, visit the front end, there is no.
Oh, hold on. Let me hide you and me.
I can move it to the other side.
No, it's all right.
So there is no front end highlighter available in the lower right corner where it would normally appear. So if I switch back to my admin user, you see it does appear. If I click on it, it opens it. It shows me the issues. So if I go back to the settings page, permissions, and I choose the subscriber again, and I give it the front end highlighter permission, save this, and then I switch to the subscriber role again, visit the front end. Now they can see it. So some people have asked for the ability to let other users see this. I will call out that if we scroll through these issues, you can't ignore any of these issues because you don't have any mutation capabilities. You don't have the literal capability to ignore issues. You also, if you look in the menu setting, you also can't rescan either because you wouldn't be able to save the issues as a contributor.
Yeah, it's totally basically like a read view.
Yes. So if I were to switch to the full editor role, they also have this available to them, and they can clear issues and rescan the page from the menu because they are a full editor. But if I were to switch back to the admin, we need to add the permissions link in that menu.
Yeah.
Go to this, and then I visit the editor, and I remove their ability to see the front end highlighter. Save it, and then I switch to the full editor again, visit the front end. They can no longer see it. So it is able to be granted to users that previously wouldn't have been able to see it, but also removed from users that previously would have been able to see it. And that's choice of the site admin. It's not a choice we're making upfront anymore. I mean, we have some defaults where by default an editor will be able to see it, but you can remove that grant as the site admin if you choose.
Yeah, and another request that we've gotten a lot was allowing certain user roles to see the audit history reports, where they generally were not able to see that unless they were an admin role or they fell within that kind of global permissions setting that we had before.
So as a full admin, I can see audit history. If I change to a user that only has the export capability, no longer see it, gets redirected away. But this user has export, can visit the export page. And if I were to change various different roles, so I've got these all set up as different test users with the user switch plugin. So audit history only. We hover over the accessibility checker menu. You see the only item available for them is audit history. If I pick the Explorer only role, we can see similarly under the accessibility checker menu, they can only pick Issue Explorer. So individual users can be granted.
So while you're here in the Issues Explorer, And for our people watching, if you haven't tried out our new Issues Explorer, give it a try. We have a past live stream all about the Issues Explorer. So you've granted them the ability to get to the Issue Explorer, and I'm guessing this role actually has dismiss capabilities as well.
Well, I just switched back to the admin role,
Oh,
who has
okay.
full capabilities. So yeah, I was able to come in here, dismiss this issue. If I switch to export only role, not export, Explorer only role, and back to the Explorer. If I were to click on this issue, I guess I've also granted them
No,
dismiss.
I don't think it'll work.
Oh, it doesn't. Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is
So I mean, you can. So this is a little bit of a UI catch too, that we actually don't remove that panel, but I think that was for a specific reason, wasn't it?
I don't remember the specific reason, but I do remember it being somewhat complex to hide this just for individual capability grants.
Yeah, because you're doing a per user capability lookup anytime that
Yes,
panel
that's
is
exactly
rendered.
it.
Yeah.
It is too unperformant to check every single post one at a
So
time.
so in most cases, we do try to hide the UI if we can, and if it can be done in a performant way. But in this instance, it looks like either this is a future solve, or we're just not able to do it in a performant way without a lot of changes to this little React app.
Yeah, and just for people who can't see it, if you try to dismiss an issue and you don't have the capability, you do get an error message back from the API that says, sorry, you're not allowed to do that. That's the same if you pick any.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of a failsafe too, if these capabilities are granted by other means than our UI, right? Through a user role editor.
Correct. If there is a mix of capabilities available and it is mixed up somehow by someone maybe manually swapping individual users with the role editor plugin, this is the gate in effect. Basically, this is an API call where this gets returned from. So regardless of what the UI shows, if they're not supposed to be able to do something, the API will also still block it.
Yeah, not just what the UI shows, but regardless of how the capabilities are actually applied.
Correct.
Right? Like if it doesn't meet that floor requirement. Now, maybe we could sit with that for a minute and go a little bit deeper. And we kind of did this ourselves a little bit when we kind of implemented the floor here for security reasons. And the reason we do that, like William said, is accessibility checker saves data to the user meta. We need to modify the user meta, and things that can be scanned and caught in our scanner and stored in the accessibility checker table can actually be information that maybe not every user at every level should see. But we did sit with this and we did kind of think about, is this appropriate? Should we be taking that extra step to make those decisions, or should we just make the capabilities and let the user open up whatever they want to open up, and regardless of the implications of what data may be exposed to what user? Because we can very well do that. And I think if we get a lot of feedback that is something requested, we may open this up further in the future. But we kind of felt like taking a little bit of a safe approach here. I don't know if you have anything to add to this, William, about kind of opening it all the way up and letting the user decide. I think that absolves, since it's all user defined, I don't think there's huge like security
I mean, we can let a user make it insecure if they choose to do that. I would rather by default we try our best to make sure that they can only pick secure options. However, I will call out that there is a filter available for anyone who is developer oriented. If they did want to bypass our minimum floors, they could edit them if they choose, but that is a developer decision only, not something that we expose anywhere right now.
Well, in that line of filters, is there a way through the filters that we've provided that somebody could grant these permissions at the user level rather than at the user role level?
I mean, yes, there absolutely is. These capabilities are standard WordPress capabilities, and if someone knows how to use the WP role class, they could grant those capabilities to whoever they choose, either to roles directly or even to individual users. We only offer role-based grants in the plugin through the permissions tab, but if someone was so inclined and they wanted an individual user, regardless of their role to have certain capabilities, they could grant those capabilities themselves with some code.
Right.
Or through the user role plugin, user editor plugin. There is plugins available as well if you want to do it in a UI, but we do not expose that ourselves through the plugin.
Right. Cool. So you touched on it very briefly, but I just kind of want to jump back a few steps and kind of ask again why in the settings the administrator role is not listed as a role where you can control permissions.
So that was a specific choice. So we decided that administrators should always have all of the capabilities at all times. In fact, if you have manage options, you can, if you have manage options on a website, you can almost do anything you choose at all times. That's not just with our plugin, that's generally how WordPress determines who an administrator user is if they have manage options. We didn't want someone to accidentally be able to remove access themselves as an administrator, but even more than that, Core's own ethos is that manage options is top tier permission.
Yeah.
There isn't anything really above that, unless you're talking about a multi-site, which, super admin capabilities. But on a single site, manage options is the highest capability level available.
Right.
And if you have manage options, you can edit your own capabilities. So
it's kind of pointless, right?
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Very good. Well, let's move on and let's talk a little bit about the installation and upgrade behavior. So new installations receive the conservative default permissions, correct?
Yes, and off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly the combination, but there is a slight deviance to what the old defaults were. The old defaults were that only administrators had access to any of the things. The new default is that editors will be able to ignore their own posts. Authors will also be able to ignore their own issues on their own posts, and both of those people will see the front end highlighter by default.
Yeah.
So that is the new default, and that is a deviance to what the old standard was. The old standard, we had the ignore. I think it was the ignore roles setting.
It was ignore permissions. Yeah.
And that was basically the grant that allowed you to see things or ignore things, and you could just pick a role in that, save it, and that user would effectively get all of the access to all of the things feasible. If you do have an option saved with custom values from previously, though, we will not grant the new capability defaults. So we will honor whatever that checkbox was set to from the old option. So there is a difference for new installs versus upgrades. We took the philosophy of never giving someone access to something they don't already have.
Right. So if I have accessibility checker installed previous to this version, and I have in my ignore permission setting, I had editors and what authors set to ignore permissions. When I upgrade to this version, there is an update process that will carry those permissions over.
Correct. So whatever the editor would have had access to previously, which would effectively be the dismiss issues on any post, dismiss globally, front end highlighter, and dismiss own issues. So these four will be honored. Well, actually, no, but let me correct that. They will never get the any post. That's always a selective choice. So these three capabilities,
Right.
dismiss own issues, front end highlighter, and dismiss issues globally is what it will migrate to if this editor was set to be able to ignore issues in the old site.
Right. So I think you may have touched this on a little bit too. So if I have accessibility checker and I upgrade to pro and I get new capabilities, I come in at the default level of those as well.
Correct. Default level is dismiss issues globally if the setting was checked previously. If there was no setting, then only admins are going to be able to dismiss globally.
And if if a user disables an add-on, right? Like say they have the export add-on and then they set permissions and then they disable the export add-on because they don't need it, and then they re-enable it later on, the permissions will come back to life, right? Because the settings.
Correct. If you delete the export plugin, it does not delete whatever options you have selected for the user here. Those are only deleted if you uninstall the base plugin with the checkbox that says to delete all the data. Otherwise, permissions get retained across activations, disables, deletions of everything except the base. The free plugin is the only one that actually has the capability to delete data on uninstall.
Cool. So we talked a little bit about our multi-site plugin, and there's some import export features inside of this and inside of Accessibility Checker Pro as well.
Correct.
We debated back and forth about should we allow permission settings to actually be included in these imports and exports and in the multi-site plugin by copying over those. Like our multi-site plugin will allow you to copy settings to all your subsites, and then that raises a question in a multi-site. There's a lot of difference on how users are applied per subsite.
Yes,
And
if you're the only user in a multi-site instance, then it is a fair assumption that you are the site owner of every site in that instance. But in our experience, most multi-site instances have site admins, which are not necessarily super admins. And in that case, it actually should be up to the site admin to decide who has access to the various different capabilities. And I had a lot of back and forth while I was working on these features to decide whether we export those settings or allow them to be migrated. And in general, the decision was that exports from one site should never carry permissions to another site for security reasons. People should know upfront what they were importing. And that is in line with how a lot of exports work outside of our plugin or just generally on the internet, is that capabilities are rarely ever exported and allowed to be re-imported. Because, for example, I could export all of the settings from this local test site and give it to someone to import into their production website. Well, this is a local site and I have less concern over security than someone who's running a live production website.
right. So on our import export screen, you've put up a notice here that reads security related settings, user permissions, and role capabilities are not included in export or import. Configure permissions manually on each site. And we will
Correct.
do a similar message in the multi-site add-on as well, right?
It's exactly the same message on the multi-site. And the multi-site previously did export the old ignore roles permission, so that did change in the multi-site plugin. We will no longer export that or clone that across websites for the reasons I just outlined. Right, the site administrator should really be the person who decides who has access to which things. And
Right.
most multi-sites in my experience, are not single admin; they are multi-admin. That's generally the point of the multi-site.
Yeah, and on multi-sites, we've seen varying levels of governance and control, and it's not always done in the most elegant way. So we decided that we don't want to circumvent access to things that a subsite owner or admin is not aware of. So if we were to implement this in the multi-site add-on, we think we would need to have kind of a governance layer and an approval layer where if you tried to apply permissions to a subsite, that subsite's admin would have to approve those before they get applied. But there's a lot of steps in that, and then we felt that there's a lot of potential for confusion or potential for things to become stale over time. So we decided to kind of err on the side of caution here again, making sure that those permissions are explicitly set with manual controls on every website. And we've been taking a lot of care with Accessibility Checker throughout its life, but even more now with the rise of AI and AI bots being able and agents being able to scan and find security vulnerabilities. We're not just
if we weren't being considerate
yeah
that, we would have got flagged by some AI bot that found the vulnerability. We were very explicit in making sure that almost everything we have included here is gated by existing capabilities. Aside from the one that is a slight overstep, but being considerate of that actually allows any of the plugins to be updated in any order or completely out of order, or one plugin never to be updated, and nothing will break. Everything that was previously the gates would still exist.
Yeah.
In any of those plugins.
Yeah, I mean, the mission here with Accessibility Checker is to make the web more accessible, right? But the mission here is twofold, or maybe even more than twofold, but security and how the Accessibility Checker handles your data and how it exposes your data as well has become of the utmost paramount concern for us as well. So some may look at these user permissions that we've implemented and say, these are kind of restrictive. Why can't I just give a subscriber all the permissions to do whatever?
Well, I will tell you a story about the time where someone wanted to have access to the full site scanner, and then instead of being able to give that, just decided to make that author level user or full administrator on the website. Well, that is a pretty big security consideration for that person to do that. We actually don't want to force you to have to give elevated core permissions to someone just so they can access a subset of our plugins capabilities.
Yeah. And this sets the stage for many capabilities to come, right?
Yeah, I hope we take a little break. But yes, this adds the framework that makes it fairly simplistic to add additional capabilities and enforce those grants anywhere in any of the plugin or any other add-ons we might build.
Yeah, we have lots of things we are cooking and lots of ideas, and having a whole permissions layer like this definitely makes everything much more secure and gives us a very clear path forward. So we do have an article on this already before our changelog live stream post goes out. If you would like to read up on this, you can find that at equalizedigital.com/accessibility-checker/permissions-settings, where you can learn about a lot of the things we went through today. This is already out in the wild, so update your version of Accessibility Checker to get these new permissions. And
also, if you can, let us know if we were correct in the floors that we picked on these, or if you have other capabilities that you might have expected that we didn't include here. Now is the time to get those in.
Yeah.
So let us know.
Let us know. We always appreciate the feedback. Well, I'm glad everybody could join us today. And William, great work on the user permissions. We will give you a little bit of a break after this.
I'm sure you'll find a bad project as well.
Yeah, on to the next project. So hope everybody has a great day. Please like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and look for the next Accessibility Checker live stream next month. Take care. See y'all.
See ya.